Welcome to your deep dive. Today, we're going to be tackling this idea that maybe conflict,
Right.
especially in the world of finance, isn't necessarily about winning.
Hmm.
What if it's more like everyone being stuck in a pattern
Right.
that they can't quite escape?
Yeah.
We've got some really interesting sources for you.
Yeah.
First up, the War of Shifting Fronts.
Okay.
It's this fictional story,
Interesting.
kind of like an epic fantasy battle about two groups,
All right.
the Bastion, who are obsessed with building these fortresses, and the Raiders, who are experts at finding their weak spots.
I see.
And then there's an article that takes this war story
Okay.
and it uses it as a way to understand how markets work.
Okay.
And then finally we have a research paper,
Oh, wow.
Recursive Market Equilibrium under Adversarial Trading,
Okay.
which explores this very idea,
Mm.
but in a more technical way with some serious math. So
Yeah.
it's like a war story meets Wall Street.
Sounds intense.
I'm already hooked.
Yeah.
Help me out here.
Sure.
What's this war all about?
Well, the story sets up this conflict
Hmm.
where you've got the Bastion always building stronger and stronger defenses.
Right.
And then you have the Raiders who are always finding new ways to break through.
Uh-huh.
The catch is that neither side actually remembers why they're even fighting anymore.
Oh, wow.
It's just this endless cycle.
Okay, I can see where this is going.
Yeah.
Sounds like a metaphor for something bigger.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
The article we have connects this fictional war
Okay.
to the real-world battle between market makers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the folks who set prices and make sure there's always someone to buy or sell from,
Mhm.
and then high-frequency traders,
Yeah.
or HFTs,
Okay.
who use these powerful computers to make, like, lightning-fast trades.
So the Bastion are like the market makers building their fortress of orders,
Exactly.
and the Raiders are the HFTs trying to exploit any cracks in the system.
Exactly.
Okay.
The article suggests that these two groups are kind of locked
Hmm?
in a sort of recursive game.
Okay.
Each one is constantly adapting to the other's moves,
Right.
but without ever really changing the overall pattern.
Yeah.
It's like a constant back and forth.
I'm starting to see how this endless cycle could actually be creating problems rather than solving them.
Right.
But how does this play out in the market?
Okay.
Can you give me a real world example?
Sure. Let's say a market maker is trying to protect their profits
Okay.
by widening the spread between the buying and selling price of a stock.
Mm-hmm.
They think they're making their position stronger.
Right.
But in reality, this might create an opportunity for HFTs to swoop in and take advantage of that wider gap.
Ah, I see. So even the market makers' attempts to defend themselves can backfire?
Precisely.
Okay.
And this is where the research paper comes in.
Okay.
It uses some pretty complex math.
All right.
But the gist is that it models how these bid-ask spreads,
Mm.
that gap between buying and selling prices,
Right.
are constantly shifting
Mm.
in response to this HFT activity.
So there's an actual equation that describes this back and forth.
Yes.
That's wild.
And it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
The story talks about a point where both sides decide to break this cycle.
So everyone chills out and calls a truce.
Not quite.
Oh,
What happens is the whole system starts to fall apart
wow.
because the conflict itself is actually what was holding it together.
Are you suggesting that a market, without this constant back and forth between market makers and HFTs, would just collapse?
It's something to consider.
Yeah.
But think about it this way. What if there are forces out there
Okay.
who actually benefit from this cycle continuing?
Mm-hmm.
That's where the story introduces this idea
Yeah.
of the silent observer.
Hold on. You're saying there could be someone or something
Yeah.
pulling the strings behind the scenes,
Yep.
actually profiting from this whole chaotic situation?
It's a possibility.
Now things are getting really interesting.
Yeah.
Tell me more about this silent observer.
Well, it could be a number of different players.
Okay.
Regulators, for example, they're tasked with keeping the market stable, right?
Right.
So they might be inclined to step in and prevent things from going haywire.
But wouldn't that be a good thing? Preventing a market crash?
Sure, in the short term.
Okay.
But what if those interventions are actually preventing the market
Mm-hmm.
from finding a more natural equilibrium?
Okay.
What if there's propping up a system that's fundamentally flawed?
Okay. I see your point.
Yeah.
Are you saying regulators are the bad guys here?
It's not about good guys and bad guys.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that everyone involved
Mm-hmm.
has their own motivations and incentives.
Mm-hmm.
Regulators have their role. Market makers have theirs. And HFTs have theirs.
Right.
But it's important to ask how those motivations might be influencing the system as a whole.
Yeah.
And if those motivations are ultimately serving the best interests of the market,
Mm-hmm.
and more importantly, individual investors like you.
All right, I'm officially mind blown. We've got these warring factions, a system on the brink of collapse, and this mysterious, silent observer lurking in the shadows.
It's a lot to unpack.
I'm completely hooked.
Yeah.
What other insights does the article offer? So we've got this silent observer, potentially keeping the cycle going, even if it's not the healthiest thing for the market. Who else could be playing that role?
Well, think about the exchanges.
Mm.
Where all these trades are happening, they're making money on every transaction, right?
Right.
So a volatile market
Yeah.
where prices are constantly jumping around actually benefits them.
It's like they're profiting from the chaos.
It's a possibility to consider.
Yeah.
And then you have the large institutional investors like
Yep.
hedge funds.
Mm-hmm.
They have the resources to develop these sophisticated algorithms
Yeah.
that can actually predict and exploit these patterns we're talking about.
So they're not just caught in the crossfire. They're actively using this dynamic to their advantage. I guess that makes sense.
Right. They might not be the ones directly setting the bid-ask spreads
Right.
or executing high-frequency trades.
Right.
But they're certainly aware of how the system works
Yeah.
and can use that knowledge to make profitable decisions.
You know, it's kind of unsettling to think about this war playing out behind the scenes. While most of us are just trying to figure out how to invest our savings, it feels like we're all just pawns in a much bigger game.
It's a valid concern,
Yeah.
and it highlights the importance of understanding these dynamics, even if you're not a professional trader.
So what can we do about it? Should we all just give up and let the algorithms and big institutions control everything?
Not at all.
Okay.
Remember, the story highlights that the system breaks down
Mhm.
when both sides stop playing their roles.
You mean if the market makers stopped adjusting spreads and the HFTs stopped exploiting them? But wouldn't that just cause a massive crash?
A sudden crash would be disastrous,
Right.
but that's not the only option.
Okay.
What if we could find a way to evolve the system itself, to create a market structure
Right.
that's less reliant on this adversarial back-and-forth dynamic?
So instead of a violent collapse, it's a more gradual shift towards something healthier.
Exactly.
Okay.
It might require a fundamental change in how we think about markets.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of viewing it as this zero-sum game, where someone has to win and someone has to lose.
Mm-hmm.
What if we focused on creating a system that benefits everyone involved?
That sounds pretty utopian. But is it even possible? These players all have their own interests. How do you get everyone on board with a whole new set of rules?
It's a big challenge, no
Right.
doubt.
Yeah.
But think about other complex systems that have evolved over time.
Okay.
Ecosystems, for example. Find ways to balance competition and cooperation.
Right.
New technologies emerge and disrupt old ways of doing things.
Mm.
Change is always possible.
Okay. So it's not hopeless. But where do we even start?
Well, awareness is the first step.
Okay.
Recognizing that these patterns exist
Mm-hmm.
and understanding how they might be influencing your investment decisions is crucial.
So educating ourselves about how the market really works, not just taking things at face value.
Precisely. Don't be afraid to ask questions, challenge assumptions, and then think about how you can use that knowledge to make more informed choices.
Like what? Give me an example.
For example, knowing how HFTs operate might make you reconsider using market orders,
Okay.
where you buy or sell at the current price no matter what.
Right.
Instead, you might want to use limit orders,
Okay.
where you set a specific price you're willing to pay or accept, giving you more control over the execution of your trade.
That's actually really helpful. I never thought about it that way before. So it's not just about understanding the big picture. It's about using that understanding to make smarter decisions in our own investing.
Exactly.
Okay.
And beyond that, you can advocate for changes to the system itself.
Okay.
Support policies that promote transparency and fairness in the financial markets.
You mean things like lobbying for stricter regulations on HFTs or demanding more accountability from exchanges?
Those are certainly options.
Yeah.
Remember, the silent observer might not always be so silent if enough people start demanding change.
So we can use our voices and our choices to make a difference.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's about empowering yourself as an investor and a participant in the financial system.
Okay. I'm starting to feel less like a pawn and more like a player in this game.
That's the spirit.
Yeah.
And remember, it's not about beating the system or trying to win the war. It's about creating a more equitable and sustainable market for everyone.
This has been a real eye-opener. It's like we've peeled back the layers of the financial system and exposed the inner workings that most people never even consider.
Yeah.
But we've also uncovered some potential solutions and ways to take action.
And that's what the deep dive is all about.
Yeah.
Empowering you with knowledge and encouraging you to think critically about the world around you.
Before we move on, is there anything else in the article that stood out to you? So we've explored how this war plays out and talked about the players involved and even touched on some potential solutions. But I'm curious, what about that fictional story, The War of Shifting Fronts? Is there anything else in there that sheds light on all of this?
There's a really interesting passage where one of the characters, a seasoned veteran of the Bastion, starts to realize that their obsession with building ever stronger defenses is actually what's fueling the Raiders' attacks.
Oh, wow.
It's like they're inadvertently creating the very conditions that lead to conflict.
So even in this fictional world,
Yeah.
they're starting to grasp the idea that maybe the way they're approaching the war is part of the problem.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's a powerful insight to apply to the real world of finance.
Right.
It's tempting to focus on building up our own individual defenses,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's through complex trading strategies or simply trying to time the market perfectly.
Right.
But what if by doing so, we're actually contributing to the overall volatility and instability of the system?
That's a pretty mind-blowing thought.
Yeah.
So are you suggesting that we should all just stop trying to protect our investments?
Not at all.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that there's a balance to be struck. Individual action is important, but it's also crucial to consider the systemic effects of our choices.
Mm-hmm.
If everyone is solely focused on maximizing their own short-term gains,
Right.
it can create a ripple effect that ultimately harms the market as a whole.
It sounds like we need a shift in perspective. Instead of viewing the market as a battlefield where we're all just fighting for scraps, maybe we need to start thinking about it more like an ecosystem where cooperation and balance are essential for long-term sustainability.
I think that's a great way to put it.
Okay.
And it circles back to the idea of evolution.
Mm-hmm.
Natural ecosystems don't thrive because one species dominates all the others.
Right.
They thrive because there's diversity, interdependence,
Yeah.
and a constant process of adaptation.
So maybe the key to a healthier financial system is not about finding a way to eliminate competition altogether,
Yeah.
but about creating a framework where competition is balanced by cooperation
Yeah.
and a shared understanding of the long-term consequences of our actions.
Precisely.
Okay.
And that brings us back to the role of the silent observer. Whether it's regulators, exchanges, or even just the prevailing mindset of the market,
Yeah.
these forces have a tremendous influence on how the game is played.
Yeah.
If we want to see real change, we need to engage with these forces and demand a more sustainable and equitable system.
You know, at the beginning of this deep dive, I was feeling a bit overwhelmed by all the complexity of the financial markets, but now I'm actually feeling a sense of empowerment.
That's great.
Like by understanding these dynamics, even if I don't have all the answers, I can at least start to make more informed choices and contribute to a better future for myself and for everyone.
That's the power of knowledge.
Yeah.
It's not just about understanding the world as it is, but about recognizing our own agency in shaping the world we want to see.
This has been an incredible journey. We've gone from a fictional war story to a deep dive into the mechanics of the financial markets and ended up with a call to action for ourselves and for these silent observers who shape the rules of the game. I have to say, I'm feeling pretty inspired.
And that's what we hope for with every deep dive.
Yeah.
To spark curiosity, encourage critical thinking, and empower you to engage with the world in a more meaningful way.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the war of shifting fronts and the fascinating world of finance. Remember, the battle for a fairer and more sustainable market is ongoing, and we all have a role to play. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep pushing for a better future. Until next time, stay curious.